Great, so we'll begin with the presentation now. Unfortunately, you'll only be able to see the slides during the presentation rather than the presenters themselves. So here are some lovely visuals of your presenters. Michelle May, our Director of Inclusive Growth, Education and Skills, will start by providing some context to the project. I will talk a little bit more about the opportunity and the requirements. Francesca Coloca, our Senior Regeneration Manager, will introduce the space and the wider development. And Mark Rund, our Senior Procurement Manager, will take us through the procurement process. So I'm just going to hand over to Michelle now, who will talk us through the project context and talk a little bit about the LLDC as an organisation. Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Viv, and hello everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. We hope that you find the session useful. For those of you that don't know, I just wanted to, as Viv said, just give a bit of background to who we are. Obviously, we're a mayoral development corporation and we have a responsibility for the management and development of Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, with a focus on delivering thousands of new homes, schools and other social infrastructure, and probably most importantly for this session, jobs. With developments like Here East, the former Press and Broadcast Centre, and East Bank, the new Cultural and Education District currently under construction on the park, we have some really exciting opportunities for local people and businesses to secure good jobs and supply chain opportunities in sectors like cultural, creative and digital industries. Next slide, please, Viv. But experience has taught us, I suppose, that job creation in itself doesn't necessarily mean that local people will benefit from all of those jobs. And so we've worked with our partners to develop EastWorks, which is our integrated employment skills and enterprise programme, as a key way to ensure that opportunities arising from our developments are accessible to local residents. With projects ranging from London Living Wage paid internships, apprenticeships and through to tailored business support, we're successfully delivering on our commitment to ensure that we connect the talents of East Londoners to the extraordinary opportunities here and coming, so that everyone has a chance to share in the development, the benefits of our development. Next slide. The programme is built on some key principles, and I think they're really important to bear in mind when you're considering this procurement and this opportunity. Our focus is on talent and potential and diversity, not deprivation and disadvantage. And our partnership with employers and sectors is about looking at what their opportunities and challenges are and how our diverse local talent can be a key to their success in the future, the success of those businesses and helping to increase their productivity. We've worked really hard to ensure that we've learnt the lessons of the past. So this is very much a demand-led programme linked to real jobs and not training for training's sake. And we continue to work closely with local partners, especially the 4 boroughs, to ensure that the programme enhances rather than duplicates existing provision. And critically, the programmes are designed to actively support and deliver good growth, with a particular focus on the payment of London Living Wage as a minimum and ensuring that working practices are fair and inclusive. Next slide, please, Viv. So we've engaged in a number of successful projects to date with partners, including delivering hundreds of apprentices across the park. And we've co-designed some really exciting initiatives, including a new 3D printing VR training academy with Hobbs at Here East. And we want to do more. We've had a number of successful pilots that have been transformational for those individuals and employers that have participated. But we know that to make the impact we want, we need to take these pilots to scale. We also need to develop new prototypes to ensure our programme continually keeps pace with the ever-evolving demands of sectors such as the cultural, creative and tech industries. And to do that, we need more employers to join us, and we need to deepen our reach into the communities we're here to serve, so that the opportunities on the park are genuinely accessible by those traditionally underrepresented in those sectors. In order to do that, we needed our programme offer to be more visible and accessible to potential users, be that employers or individuals. And to achieve this, we made the decision to secure a physical space on the park to provide that visibility, whilst also developing a programme and partnership that connects with existing community-based hubs and activity in the 4 boroughs. As well as establishing this hub and an associated programme, we're committed to developing a governance structure which reflects the principles that I just set out, that formalises our partnership with the boroughs, employers and other key local partners, which reflects our commitment to diversity and which pushes us further with our programme to include the active involvement of local young people in the ongoing design of the programme, and ensures the long-term financial sustainability of the programme and the hub. Next slide, please, Viv. So this diagram just gives, I hope, a flavour of the types of activities that we require the service provider to deliver, and Viv will set these out in more detail later in the presentation. But I suppose the key point I wanted to flag here is that there will be a number of complementary activities that will form part of the Good Growth Hub offer, but they will be delivered by other partners. So key when you're thinking about this opportunity is to think about how the programme that we deliver through this procurement is successfully integrated into that wider offer. And again, hopefully there'll be more discussion about this throughout the session. Thanks, Viv.
Great, thanks, Michelle. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the opportunity and kind of the requirements that we have as part of this procurement process. So we're looking to appoint a Good Growth Hub service provider to manage the Good Growth Hub space and to design and deliver the Good Growth Hub service. Due to the breadth of the role and our requirement, we'd be looking to appoint one lead organisation, but we imagine them working with multiple delivery partners in order to kind of meet the requirements successfully. There are three key components to the role. Number one is the day-to-day operations and facilities management of the hub. Number two is the design and delivery of the Good Growth Hub service, which will deliver a wide range of skills, employment and enterprise activities. And number three is the Good Growth Hub services management. So LLDC, in terms of the facilities management and operations, LLDC are the leaseholder for the Good Growth Hub space, and they will grant the service provider a licence to occupy the Good Growth Hub space for 8 years at a peppercorn rent. In exchange, the service provider will be responsible for the facilities management and the full operation of the space in accordance with the requirements set out in the licence to occupy. The service provider will be responsible for ensuring full insurances are in place for the space, for paying utility costs and business rates, which will be subject to the status of the business. In addition to all the obligations set out in the lease with regards to kind of running the space, we'll also be looking for the service provider to create an inclusive environment which would appeal to a wide range of stakeholders, which would include local residents, local community groups and employers, to provide an excellent user experience for all users using the hub, and to develop a positive reputation for the Good Growth Hub space. So the service provider role is about more than just managing the space. It's about developing a high quality demand-led skills, employment and enterprise programme. And as Michelle mentioned in her introduction, the Good Growth Hub provides an opportunity to further develop and scale some of our most successful pilots by working with more businesses and providing more opportunities for local people. Some of the programmes we've already established and want to scale are our pre-employability programmes. So these are really about connecting local people to businesses, developing soft employability skills, ensuring access to industry-led careers advice and guidance, and developing professional networks. Secondly is STEP, which is our shared training and employment programme. This really supports local people with their first experience of paid work in the creative cultural sector by providing a London living wage 12-month paid internship alongside a professional development programme and professional networks. And thirdly, we want to expand and grow our kind of career support service that provides local residents with one-to-one careers advice and guidance, whether that be for applying for a job, updating their portfolio, preparing for an assessment centre or an interview. This will complement already existing borough services by supporting local people with very specialist advice on accessing opportunities in growth sectors on and around the park, predominantly the creative, cultural and technology sectors. The hub also presents an opportunity to pilot new initiatives, and as a result, we'll be looking to establish a programme for aspiring freelancers. Many of you know that a third of the UK's creative workforce are self-employed, and it can be really challenging to get started in this way. And with more and more people looking to establish portfolio careers and work in a more agile way, it's an opportunity to support local residents to develop the skills to do so. And as we move out of lockdown, this may become an increasingly popular option for people looking for work. In addition to this, we want the hub to be a space for employers on and around the park, as well as local residents. You know, a key aim for the hub is to ensure that we're supporting businesses to adopt fair and inclusive working practices. And in line with the Mayor's Good Work Standard, we want to ensure businesses are developing diverse teams, that they're paying fairly, and that they're supporting employees with opportunities for progression within their career. So as a result, we'll be looking to establish a series of events and masterclasses for businesses to gain support in doing so, and continue to build relationships with other like-minded employers locally and ensure that really important good growth element that Michelle talked about in her initial introduction. In addition to that, we'll also be looking to develop a Good Growth Hub alumni network that will further provide opportunities for people once they've completed their training, that develops ambassadors for our work, but also nurtures role models for future cohorts of people accessing the Good Growth Hub service. And lastly, there's space within the programme for the service provider to suggest new pilot initiatives that respond to industry and local need, and to develop new initiatives that we can pilot and test and grow into the future. And, you know, we recognise that the pandemic will challenge us and the service provider to look at how these activities are developed and delivered. We'll need to consider potentially a more blended approach to training and development, with a mixture of online and face-to-face activities, ensuring that we're kind of in keeping with COVID-19 guidelines, and particularly social distancing guidelines as those progress over the next year or so. We also anticipate delivery of the programme to take place outside of the hub. You know, we want to really work with local organisations, community groups, schools and employers to provide alternative spaces for delivery, as well as just looking at delivery coming from the hub as well. So in terms of services management, currently our Eastworks programme is made up of several different projects delivered under separate contracts by various partners, meaning that we can find ourselves paying for the same activities multiple times. Through the Good Growth Hub, we want to achieve a more integrated service that effectively manages interdependencies across projects, that identifies resource and delivers efficiencies, and achieves economies of scale as projects begin to grow and develop. The service provider will be responsible for managing all parties involved in the design and the delivery of the service. And as I mentioned before, we don't foresee one organisation being to deliver this entire requirement by themselves. And so the lead service provider will need to be able to cultivate partnerships, manage partnerships, and deliver a kind of consortium arrangement really successfully. Each year, we expect the service provider to work with the delivery partnership to develop an annual delivery plan, and that will outline key activities, milestones, stakeholders, comms plans, budgets, and anticipated outcomes and outputs. They'll also be responsible for marketing the Good Growth Hub service, for performance monitoring and reporting, which will be measured using key performance indicators, and producing an annual evaluation. So funding. The total available funding from the LLDC will be 1.3 million over 5 years. The service provider will have a match funding target of £650,000 over 5 years, which will be both cash and in kind, and you can see the breakdown of that on the table. Match funding will not need to be secured ahead of submitting proposals, but we'll be looking for demonstrable experience of securing match funding previously. And you'll see that we've kept the match funding target in year one low, as we want the service provider to use our investment to start developing and building the programme. But we anticipate, years, the early years 1 to 2, to be about establishing the programme and solidifying initiatives, and the latter stages to be about scale and growth. In line with our own LLDC budgets, each year our funding will decrease and the match funding requirement will increase as we look to ensure the hub's sustainability beyond LLDC funding. So this opportunity will be an 8-year contract with LLDC funding in place for 5 years as per that table. The service provider will be required to work with the LLDC and the Good Growth Hub board and governance structure to raise funding and sponsorship for the delivery of the Good Growth Hub service from years 6 to 8 of the contract. Fundraising and sponsorship targets will be set from year 3 onwards and will be the joint responsibility of the Good Growth Hub board, the service provider and the LLDC. So I'm going to hand over now to Francesca, who will talk to you a little bit about the space and the wider development.
Thanks, Viv. So the Good Growth Hub, could you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So the Good Growth Hub will be based at Hackney Bridge, which was formerly known as Clarnico Quay, which is a site that sits just in front of the Copper Box basketball arena along the canal across from Hackney Wick Station. This is also near Here East. For those of you that are familiar with the area. The wider site is being developed by Makeshift, which are the same team that built and managed Pop Brixton and Peckham levels. So Hackney Bridge will be a home for independent startups, including makers spaces, studio, office, and co-working space, event space, and space for food and beverage, including bars, restaurants, and food stalls. The scheme will have affordability, community, and creativity at its core. So a good portion of the units will be at affordable rent, and that's comparable to the local market. So very cheap space for startups to get going. And each tenant in this scheme will participate in a give back scheme where they contribute their time and skills to the local area and local organizations and communities. And that's what we felt made it a really good fit as a site for the Good Growth Hub. A lot of our principles are aligned, and we think that there will be a lot of opportunity for businesses and service users working with the Good Growth Hub on the site itself. Could you go to the next slide, please? So here are the latest photos of the site at Hackney Bridge, and you can see it just sits along the canal there, and on your side of the screen is where Hackney Wick Station is. The site is on track. It's experienced a little bit of delay due to COVID, but it's on track for an October 2020 opening, so tenants will start moving in from then. And the team there at Makeshift is modeling how this will open to the public based on current government guidance around COVID-19. Could you go to the next slide, please? So in terms of the space itself for the Good Growth Hub, here it is. You can see it's got lots of natural light and views of Hackney Wick and Fish Island just out the window there. It's on the first floor of what's called Block A, which is adjacent to the canal, facing the canal in Hackney Wick. It's about a 200 square meter space or 2,000 square foot space. It has a lift, so very accessible space, and toilets just on the other side of those doors. Next slide, please. And in terms of ideas for the space, as Viv and Michelle have mentioned, LLDC will be designing and fitting out the space for the contract winner. And we've started the process of basic concept design for this space based on what we know from the market, our service providers and our service users. And so at a minimum, we're envisaging this space will have meeting rooms and a large training space, one-to-one space, plus informal breakout space, a kitchenette, which is crucial for any office and training space, and a desk area. But we think that flexibility and practicality are really key principles, and that openness and capacity for private space is really important. We think the design should be simple, modern, and creative, and it will need to fit in with the kind of surroundings at Hackney Bridge. And the next slide, please. In terms of the design and fit out process, we're in the midst of procuring architects and fit out contractors, but we do want to align this design process with the appointment of a service management provider so that the winning provider can feed into the design, which we think is crucial for both that organization, their usefulness of the space, as well as service users. We estimate about an 8 to 10 week fit out, and would aim to hand over the space to the provider by the end of 2020. And all going well, aim for a grand opening of the space in January 2021.
Okay, if I could pass over to Mark now, who will take you through the procurement process. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Vivian. Good morning, everyone. As Vivian mentioned at the top of the call, my name is Mark Runn, Senior Procurement Manager here at London Legacy Development Corporation. Been working very closely with the Regen team on this procurement, and it's great to be involved in what is going to be a legacy project for the LLDC. Would you mind moving on to the next slide, please, Viv? So I'm just going to very briefly talk about the procurement for this contract, starting off with the procurement process. Most importantly for you guys, how to take part in the competition and the procurement program itself. Next slide, please, Viv. So the procurement will follow the Public Contract Regulations 2015 and will be conducted under light touch regime rules. The structure of the procurement itself is going to be essentially a two-stage procurement process. So the first stage will be a supplier selection questionnaire, and that will be split into essentially two phases. The first phase will be a set of initial pass-fail questions that will focus on standard questions such as financial standing and insurances, amongst other areas. The second phase of questions as part of the SQ will be assigned a weighted score, and these will be marked on a scale between unsatisfactory and excellent confidence. Evaluations will be carried out by LLDC. And at the end of that evaluation process, each applicant will be scored a total weighted score out of 100. And then we envisage on taking a small number of applicants through to the next stage, which will essentially be the invitation to tender stage, ITT. And that's where we'll request sort of more formal tender proposals from tenderers on how to take the services forward. And once we get those submissions back, there'll be an evaluation that will be conducted internally, and we'll obviously select a winner from that process, and that will proceed to contract award. Next slide, please, Viv. So the information that we published as part of the supplier selection questionnaire stage will be the draft services specification, draft contract terms and conditions with the license to occupy agreements, and we'll also be publishing the SQ evaluation criteria as well as part of that. At invitation to tender stage, the final contract terms, license to occupy agreement, and the final services specification will be provided to all tenderers that have been shortlisted, along with other tendering instructions as well to make it clear on the sort of what you need to submit as part of your tender. Next slide, please, Viv. Most importantly for you guys is just some details on this slide about how to take part in the competition. So the contract opportunity we published on the OG Notice website. You can see the link there below. We're also going to make it available on Contracts Finder. The link there is below. And on both of these advertisements, there'll be a link through to our e-tendering portal, which is Delta Resourcing, which is essentially going to be used to manage the procurement. We could probably look to arrange to send out a link to everyone on this webinar with details of the opportunity once it's been published. And once the SQ goes live, we would request that all tender clarifications around this contract to be submitted through the Delta system for that. Next slide, please, Viv. So in terms of timeline, we're looking to get the SQ stage launched next week, with a deadline for responses to that selection questionnaire in July. And then from that, the ITT stage will be launched in August, with deadline for ITT responses in the same month, and then followed by contract award and execution of the licensed occupier agreement and services contract in September. And all being well, fingers crossed, contract commencement in October this year. So I'm just going to hand back to Vivian.
Okay, I'm just going to bring the presenters back to the screen to answer a couple of questions.
Okay. Right, morning everyone. We've had a few questions come in. So the first one is obviously, can attendees be given a copy of the presentation, which I'll pass to Viv. You happy to send it out?
Yes, absolutely. So after this webinar, we will be posting on our website this presentation, a recording of this webinar, and also a list of any questions that come through after the webinar as well, and the answers to those. So they'll be available on our website from Wednesday, the 10th of June. And I would say that if you have, we'll follow up with an email after this webinar, and if you have any questions about the opportunity after this webinar, you can email those in to us, or any comments with relation to the to what you've heard today. We can also respond to that as well.
Great, thanks, Viv. There's also a couple of questions about sharing the details of the participating organisations today, so that participants can explore the potential collaborations. So again, I'll pass that one to you, Viv.
Yes, so when you signed up to the webinar today, there would have been an option that said, would you like to share your details with other attendees, and you would have clicked yes or no to that. I have seen a couple of people have said no, so we will respect that. But following this webinar, we will share details of people who attended. If you don't want your details shared with others, please can you email the email on the Eventbrite by the end of the day, and we'll share contact details with everyone tomorrow. Thank you. Okay, great.
More, I think, for you, Viv. I'm afraid you're obviously the go-to person. Have business rates been calculated for the sites? And there was another question around, has the peppercorn rent amount been set?
Business rates haven't been set. We are working with Hackney on looking at what those may be, and we'll be able to get back to you on that, possibly for when, well, hopefully in time for when the procurement launches next week.
Okay, great. There's a couple of questions. Julia Bollum's raised one about specification or prospectus available. Is there one, basically? And that is also sort of overlaps quite closely with another question that's come in around, do we have set metrics and milestones to define the project's success over the 5 years of delivery? So I think that probably, again, you, Viv, isn't it?
Yeah, so we'll be looking to launch all the documentation with regards to this opportunity next week, and we will share that when it's gone live on the Delta portal, as Mark mentioned. And within that, there will be a really detailed services specification, which will go into quite a lot of detail around each of those 3 areas that I kind of looked at today: the facilities management, the design and delivery of the programme, and also the services management. Alongside that, you will also be able to review the licence to occupy, which will outline all the requirements of kind of running and managing that space as well. All of those, we're not going to release anything before then, because we need to be transparent and release all documentation at the same time. So at some point next week, you'll be able to view that on the Delta portal.
Thanks, Viv.
It's another question there that I've forgotten what it was.
No, I think that covers it. There's a couple of questions around the SSQ and procurement requirements, probably one for you and Mark. The first one is the SSQ and procurement requirements going to be focused on the lead partner, or is there an expectation for the potential collaborating partners to also provide financials and insurances? So I'll direct that one to Mark.
Yeah.
What level of yeah?
We're going to be looking at it from a lead provider perspective.
Okay, so effectively the financials and insurances will be related to the lead provider only?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll just jump in, because I think I missed out the question on the kind of key metrics and milestones there.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Yeah, so we will be the success of the programme will be monitored through key performance indicators, and all of those key performance indicators will be made available when the SQ launches next week. They will be around things like number of people into jobs, number of people accessing careers advice and guidance. They will be around number of businesses engaged in the design and delivery of the programme. So it's very much about it's very much about training of local residents and working with businesses to support the development of the programme. There will be kind of milestones in place in terms of how we see the programme progressing over the 5 years, and so a lot of that will be included in the SQ documentation, which will be released next week.
Okay. Another one for Mark. We've got a participant from Hamburg in Germany, and just asking whether we would be welcoming European expertise as part of the service. Mark, do you want to sort of pick that one up as part of procedurally how far out this is going?
What's the question? Sorry, didn't quite.
Would we welcome European expertise as part of the delivery of the service? So bidders from Europe, effectively.
Well, it's being published in OJU, so yeah, I think yes is the question to that. Yeah.
Okay. Viv, one for you again. I think there's a question around: is there a limit to the amount of delivery partners that the lead organisation might include in their consortium? No,
that's completely down to the lead provider to make that decision based on looking at the requirements set out in the ITT. So we welcome as many partners as that provider feels they can work successfully with and manage.
Okay. Fine. Then there is a question. I might just need a bit of an extra clarification from Manwara. Do you have an expectation regarding all the areas of East London neighbouring the hub, part of the KPIs? I think that's probably a question of the extent to which the sort of the extent of the services is going to be delivered geographically. So Viv, again, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so we'll be, as Michelle mentioned in her introduction, so we will be looking to kind of work with the neighbouring boroughs that make up the park. So that's Hackney, Tower Hamlets, Waltham Forest and Newham. So our programme will target residents from those 4 boroughs, and we'll look to specifically work with local organisations, employers from around that area as well. And so our KPIs will be targeted at engaging local people and also engaging local businesses as well. It's not to say that we can't work with businesses outside of those 4 boroughs, but obviously this is quite a localised focus for the programme. Great,
thank you. Glenn, one for you, I think, Francesca. Glenn's asking about the participation of SMEs and the local supply chain as part of the construction and fit out phases.
Yeah, so we are, we're approaching a number of local and London-based SMEs to do the design and fit out of the space. Yep.
Okay. And so just a couple of follow-ups from Ben and Barbara regarding how the SSQ is going to work. So Ben's asking, just checking I heard correctly, will the decision be based on the lead org rather than the consortium that brings together? And Barbara asking that it's the lead provider who takes the SSQ. So do you just want to explain a little bit maybe about how the procurement will work in terms of evaluating the partnership, the consortium as well? But obviously we're receiving single bids from the lead provider. Is that Mark? Do you want to take that one with Viv?
Yeah, I guess that's one that we're just sort of finalising at the moment, really, and it's probably better once you see the ESQ documents. You'll be able to see all the questions rather than kind of me to go into too much detail about it. So it's probably one to actually go on Delta and download the tender pack, and you can see the whole questions and how it's laid out.
And just to add to that, so the lead provider will be the organisation who will respond to that SQ, and it will ask questions. You know, the SQ will very much focus on demonstrating an organisation's track record and experience, and will look to kind of assess the requirements that I've laid out here. So it will be from the perspective of the lead organisation, but there will be questions in there around coordinating and supporting a consortium. But yes, and case studies as well. But yeah, it will be more about the lead provider than the consortium.
Sorry, Viv, can I just add, it's just in thinking about going back to the sort of the principles that I set out in the context piece, and learning lessons from the past. I think for those of us who've been involved in these sorts of processes before, we are very aware of frustrations from some smaller expert local groups who might feel like they're part of a bidding process and then not sort of part of a real delivery partnership once a bid is won. And we are doing all we can through this process, as Viv said, to test the strength of those partnerships and to understand that, because we really, when we were pulling this together, I think we really felt very strongly that the success of this programme will rely on really sort of strong collaborations between organisations, because there are quite a few different activities within the overall programme. So we hope that we have addressed that within the procurement process, but we are very mindful of those sorts of tensions, I suppose, in when bringing collaborative bids together.
Thanks, Michelle. That's helpful, actually, and that probably goes some way to addressing Ben's question about hearing a community voice as part of the assessments of bids. Is there anything, Viv, particularly, Francesca, you might want to add to how the sort of community voice, as Ben puts it, is going to be reflected in bids that Michelle hasn't already said?
Do you want me to take that? So how the community voice be, sorry, could you repeat that? How the community voice will be... How
will the community voice be heard or reflected in the assessment of the bids that come in? Yeah, so we will be working really closely with the 4 boroughs on assessing the bids at ITT stage. So they will be a part of the panel and have been a part of the kind of the process for establishing this hub and the procurement. So we will have kind of representation from across the boroughs as part of that. And also as well, I will stress that actually, part of the kind of development of this procurement opportunity
has been around kind of engaging local partners and local residents, and it's been taken a lot from learnings from our current programme around kind of, you know, what businesses need, but what local residents need as well. And so it's kind of been informed a lot by that, and likewise our evaluation criteria will reflect that as well.
Good, thanks, Viv. Mark's just asking about the split of capital and revenue funding. Have we got anything we want to, any information we want to give there about how it's split?
The LLDC funding, yeah, so that will be entirely revenue funding, and it will be really about kind of delivering the kind of the programme or the Good Growth Hub service. So yeah, there won't be any capital contributions in that 1.3 million. You know, we have made a capital contribution to the space, and that will allow us to then provide that space at a peppercorn rent to the provider. So that is our capital contribution there.
That's helpful. Thanks, Viv. There aren't any more questions coming through as yet. Do you give people another sort of 30 seconds or a minute? If there are any last questions for the panel, send them through now. If not, we'll hand back over to Viv. So Mark's asking if the space is being provided on a pure shell and core basis.
No, so we will be we'll be fitting out the space. So it will be equipped with basic furniture, kitchen, and yeah, equipped with lighting and all of that. So no, it's to spec basically for category B. So it would be fitted out fully. We won't be providing things like computers or printers. That would be up to the provider. We're aiming to have audio visual in a couple of the training rooms. So yeah, it will be fit out.
Okay, thanks, Francesca. Viv, I think this one's for you. Manwara's just asking, beyond the peppercorn rent period, have we any idea what the sort of rent levels will be like for the space after that period has elapsed?
I might actually transfer that over to Francesca.
Okay.
It's probably a little more about, no, it's fine, but more about the wider development, and maybe Francesca, you can talk a little bit about the fact that it is our development.
Well, the rent is your rent. If you were the managing provider, your rent would be paid for 8 years. So it's not 5 years, it's 8 years. And beyond the 8 years, that would be subject to negotiation with the landlord, who is makeshift. Hard to say what the rental levels will be in 8 years' time, but I suspect subject to lots of different market forces. But yeah, if you would like, if it's relevant, we can get some information, general context for the rental across the rest of the site, and put that in the publication next week, Viv. Some examples, but it will vary from space to space across the site.
And it probably is worth adding to that as well that that, you know, this contract will be for 8 years, and the lease will be for 8 years, like Francesca said. The wider makeshift development is interim, and you know, is on a 12-year lease currently. And I think, you know, through the 8 years, you know, we will be working really closely with the service provider and the Good Growth Hub board to look at what the future of the hub is, and to assess that. So, you know, depending on kind of the scale and size of the programme, you know, we might find that, you know, that the hub is better suited to another space across the park somewhere. So I think, you know, it's a long time, 8 years, and we'll be going through quite an evolutionary process that I think will work really closely together with the service provider to look at what happens beyond the 8 years, and that space beyond the 8 years might not be the space that the hub sits in the future.
Okay, thanks, Viv. Francesca, I'll keep it on the sort of space management for now a minute, although Heather, I see, has asked a question about consortium partnerships, but Mark's asking whether the property is going to be offered as a lease or a license. It's
a license to occupy.
Okay. Thanks for that. Heather, just a bit of a late arrival, wanted to just check about proposals around how consortium partnerships are going to be developed. I mean, who wants to take that one? Viv, again?
Yeah, sure. So following, we were just discussing this at the beginning of the Q&A, but following the session today, we will be sharing people's details who have agreed to share their details from this webinar. So you'll get a kind of contact list of people who have attended this and who are interested in the opportunity. So that will be an opportunity to look at forming partnerships with people interested, and then also as well, we would be encouraging people to form partnerships with their already existing networks as well, and people that they've worked with in the past, because I think that's going to be quite vital to the success of this. Having some established partnerships and then also looking for newer partnerships through this webinar as well. And Mark, I don't know, just a quick question for Mark. I don't know if through the Delta portal people can connect with one another, if you're able to see people who are interested in the bid. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, well, we can see, just only internally, we can see a list of companies that have expressed an interest in the tender. But that would only be from our perspective rather than externally.
Okay.
Great. Okay, thank you. I don't know if there are any more questions, please send them through quickly. If not, we're going to wrap up with Viv, I think. Oh, here we go. There's Iona. This one's for Michelle, I think, about the 4 boroughs being involved in the evaluation, and does that preclude them from being as part of a consortium?
Well, that's a good question. I might look to sort of Mark from a procurement point of view. I mean, what we've said to people in our sort of informal discussions today is, we very much want the boroughs as strategic partners to be working with us on the development, the ongoing development of this programme, as you have been through all of the programme to date. But I suppose there becomes a point in the process, does there, Mark, where people have to sort of identify whether they are actually going to be part of the competition, in which case I think that would then take them out of the side of sort of assessing, evaluating bids. So I think there will be a point in the process when someone would, an organisation would have to declare, what their sort of intentions are in terms of the process. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a fair assumption. There's a conflict of interest question around that, which would be addressed as picked up as part of the evaluation. So yeah, we'll have to assess it nearer the time.
I think there are a few things to say. In the sort of one of the early slides, with the diagram, there was the sort of the hub services, and then a number of sort of complementary services, including the sort of the borough job brokerage services. So we don't see them as being something that are sort of funded and delivered as part of this programme, but they are absolutely core to the success of this programme, because we're not proposing to start doing recruitment outside of the very well established network that we already have with all of you as boroughs. So I think perhaps have a look at sort of the documents when they come out, and then if you need any further clarification from us about, are there things that the boroughs currently sort of do as part of their direct delivery which isn't sort of reflected in that diagram, then we can sort of hopefully provide some clarification on that, so that you're able to make up your mind about which side of the fence you sit on. But obviously, the work we do around apprenticeships, the work we've done in the past with you funding capacity within local borough job brokerages, there is still sort of room for that outside of this programme, and we probably would need to have a discussion with you about how that sort of works.
Okay, thanks for that, both. Okay, are there any restrictions around the source of match funding? Who wants to take that one?
I can take that. I mean, I wouldn't say that there are any restrictions around the source of match funding. You know, I think we've got two requirements around match funding, that it's in kind and cash, and that is, you know, broken down in the table I shared, but also will be broken down further in the SQ documentation. Mark, I wonder from a procurement perspective if you will be kind of checking sources of funding from just a legal perspective as well, and if there's anything to say on that.
Well, I guess, is that coming from the perspective of funding secured before the launch of the Good Growth Hub? I'm assuming that's the case. I think Vivian's right. There'll be some more details in the scope of services that will set out what the requirements are around the funding. So it's probably best to take a look at that once the documents go live.
I think I'd just add, as well as that, I mean, as sort of thinking as from a bidder's perspective, it may be that part of the question is about how sort of clean is the LLDC's money. So it's not, we don't have money that's mixed with ESF, for example. So if you were looking to put ESF and things like that in, that would all be okay. So our funding, it comes directly from the mayor as part of our role as a mayoral development corporation. So I think that, you know, if you've got other types of regeneration funding, that is all matchable, but again, you can sort of seek clarification through this process. I think in terms of if you're looking to bring in things that are around sort of sponsorship and things like that over time, then obviously we would want to be very sure as an organisation that the source of that funding doesn't cut across any of our objectives around good growth, etc. But that's, I think, a sort of probably not the basis of that question. But our funding can be matched with traditional match funding from other regeneration funds, and we've done that in the past.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. Just Monroe's put out or asked a question, I think further clarification regarding the preclusions of boroughs being part of a consortium. So do you just want to cover off again the potential conflict of interest question with regards to boroughs as part of an evaluation versus boroughs as part of a consortium? I think the difference, just make that clear again.
Yeah, well, I guess it's more of an internal question for us, really, because we haven't decided the final evaluation panel yet. So really, we would have to sort of take that away and come back to you, because we don't know the names of individuals who are involved in the evaluation. But as part of the tendering process, there'll be an opportunity for bidders to actually say if there's any conflicts of interest with any parties, and we'll make those parties clear as part of the tender as to who we might be liaising with. So it will get picked up as part of the SQ.
Okay. Were you going to jump in there, Michelle?
I was just going to, I mean, I can see where some of those, you know, the sort of the possible scenarios, and I think that it's raised some questions for me, and I think it'd be really good if we could sort of take that away and have a think about and come back with some real clarity on that, because I can see where, you know, boroughs might be approached by bidders to support their bids, for example, and there might be a scenario where a borough has a direct service that might want to be part of the sort of the offer. And so I think it would be helpful if we just took a bit of time to reflect on that. Not a lot of time, because you need to get going, but just to come back with absolute clarity on that one, because I can see there are a few scenarios in there that there's some subtleties.
Thanks, Michelle. That's helpful, and actually leads us very nicely into Julia's question about whether we'll be publishing an FAQ.
We will be. Mark, is there an FAQ as part of the documentation for the SQ?
Is that coming from the point of tendering, or what sort of FAQ is that kind of asking about? Is that regards to the tendering process, or?
I think it's probably, I mean, Julie might want to clarify. I'm assuming it's on the basis of once partners have, say, seen the presentation seen the list of participants on today's webinar and want to sort of start exploring in more detail partnerships and the opportunity, whether that, if they've got any questions, how do they address those, and whether we'll sort of be covering them off via an FAQ or another mechanism.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do, if there's sort of bespoke clarifications that you've got, just issue those through the Delta resourcing portal, and we'll come back to you as soon as we can.
And just to note, so we will be, we will be publishing any questions that come in as a result of this webinar, and we can highlight actually some of the core questions that we've had today, as part of an FAQ as guidance to bidders when we post things online, so we can just create some, some clarity around the question about boroughs. So we'll publish some key FAQs as part of the webinar going online.
Okay, great, thank you for that. I think we're at time, aren't we, Viv? So do you want to just wrap things up?
Yeah, great. So thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, and thank you very much for all of your questions.